face. This place is about to close because of you.
If you survived a serious injury, you wouldn't be laughing like that.
A waitress is laughed at for her scars until a Hell's Angel recognizes the tattoo. When Hell's Angels President Tank Morrison saw the faded medical corps tattoo on the scarred waitress's wrist, he realized she was the trauma surgeon who'd saved his life in that same diner 3 years ago. Mel's Roadside Diner squatted beside Highway 99 in California's Central Valley like a forgotten relic, its neon sign flickering against October twilight that painted oil derricks black against dying sky. Inside, cracked vinyl booths and chrome stools bore witness to decades of truckers, roughnecks, and wanderers seeking refuge from endless asphalt. At 6:47 p.m., the dinner rush brought familiar faces and cruel entertainment that management tolerated because paying customers were scarce on this forgotten stretch of nowhere. Dr. Sarah Chin, now just Sally, to regulars who didn't know her past, had worked at Mel's for 8 months, long enough for locals to develop creative nicknames for the burn scars covering the left side of her face and neck. At 38, she moved with practiced efficiency, learned through 15 years as trauma surgeon before the malpractice lawsuit destroyed her career and nearly her sanity. The lawsuit had been baseless family, claiming she'd been drunk during surgery that saved their son's life, but legal costs, media coverage, and medical board investigation had bankrupted her professionally and personally. Her medical license was under review pending appeal, leaving her unemployable in healthcare while fighting $300,000 in legal debts. Pipeline contractors from nearby fracking operations provided steady customers and daily harassment. Their crude jokes about Two-Face and Harvey Dent mixing entertainment with cruelty that Mel ignored because their money kept the diner afloat. Sarah endured their mockery while waiting for appeal hearings that might restore her medical career or confirm its permanent destruction. Tonight's harassment escalated when crew chief Danny Viper Kowalski decided Sarah's appearance was driving away customers and demanded she cover that mess with makeup or find employment where decent people don't have to look at you. His crew's laughter built toward confrontation that would test whether Sarah's dignity could survive another assault on her destroyed self-worth. "Jesus, Sally, you're making me sick looking at that face," Viper announced loud enough for the entire diner to hear. "Maybe wear a bag over your head, do everyone a favor." His pipeline crew erupted in familiar laughter while Sarah maintained professional composure despite humiliation that burned worse than the scars they mocked. "What can I get you gentlemen this evening?" she asked with dignity 15 years of medical training had ingrained. "How about reconstructive surgery?" called out Viper's foreman Jake Walsh, triggering another round of cruel jokes about her appearance. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee, muscle memory from surgery fighting current reality of serving men who saw her only as entertainment. The small medical corps tattoo on her wrist, mostly faded but still visible, remained hidden beneath her long sleeves, last connection to identity as healer rather than victim. Through the window, she noticed 3 motorcycles pulling into the parking lot Harleys, with riders wearing leather vests that meant serious people had arrived at Mel's diner. Sarah's survival strategy involved enduring harassment while avoiding confrontation that could cost her the only job available to someone fighting malpractice allegations. Viper's crew represented economic necessity. Their tips paid rent, while their cruelty reminded her daily of everything she'd lost. But approaching bikers changed dynamics unpredictably. Hell's Angels commanded respect through reputation rather than employment contracts, their presence automatically shifting power balance in any civilian space they occupied. "Sally, you got customers," Mel called from behind the grill, his tone suggesting she should prepare for complications motorcycle clubs brought to his establishment. The lead biker entered with presence that filled the diner's 6'2" gray bearded face, mapping decades of experiences civilians couldn't imagine. Patches indicating chapter president authority that Viper's crude humor wouldn't impress. His companions flanked him with military precision while surveying room for threats. Viper's crew fell silent as bikers claimed corner booth with sightlines covering exits. The sudden quiet felt more dangerous than previous loud mockery. "Welcome to Mel's," Sarah said, approaching their table with professional courtesy despite nervousness about serving Hell's Angels leadership. "Coffee and whatever's good," the president replied with unexpected courtesy. His voice carried authority without aggression, leadership through competence rather than intimidation. As Sarah poured coffee, her sleeve rode up slightly, exposing the faded medical corps tattoo that had once represented her identity as trauma surgeon. The biker's eyes focused on the medical symbol with recognition that transcended casual observation. "Ma'am, that's a medical corps tattoo," he said quietly, studying Sarah's scarred features with growing intensity. "You serve in military medicine?" "Civilian trauma surgery?" Sarah replied carefully, uncertain where this conversation was heading. The biker continued examining her face with expressions cycling through confusion, recognition, and something approaching amazement. "What's your full name?" he asked with urgency, suggesting more than casual interest. "Dr. Sarah Chen, well, formerly Dr. Chen." The biker went completely still, coffee cup frozen as understanding dawned. "Dr. Sarah Chen, trauma surgery, Mercy General Hospital. You operated on gunshot victim, massive internal bleeding, September 12, 2021. Sarah's breath caught as this stranger somehow knew specific details about her surgical cases. "How could you possibly know?" "Because you saved my life that night," the biker interrupted, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm Robert Tank Morrison. You kept me alive while I bled out on your operating table. Sometimes angels disguise themselves as demons to test our capacity for September 12th. Sarah's memory crystallized around that horrific night. Hell's Angels president brought in with multiple gunshot wounds, internal bleeding that should have been fatal, surgery that pushed her skills beyond textbook limitations. You were hit by rival gang members outside the Rusty Anchor." "That's right," Tank replied, tears forming in eyes hardened by decades of violence. "Mongol's ambush, 3 bullets, dying when paramedics brought me in. You operated for 7 hours straight, refused to give up when other doctors said I was finished." Viper's crew watched this exchange with confusion. Their entertainment target was apparently connected to Hell's Angels' leadership in ways they couldn't understand or challenge safely. "Tank, I remember telling you that Hell's Angels presidents don't die on my watch," Sarah said, the words bringing back her confidence as surgeon rather than victim of harassment. "Exactly what you said. Presidents don't die on my watch. You saved my life when everyone else had written me off," Tank replied, studying Sarah's scars with new understanding. "Dr. Chen, what happened to you?" Sarah explained the malpractice lawsuit, media destruction, financial ruin that had transformed respected surgeon into diner waitress fighting to survive both legally and economically. The diner's atmosphere shifted dramatically as other customers realized they were witnessing reunion between Hell's Angels president and trauma surgeon whose scars told story of professional destruction rather than medical heroism. Viper's crew retreated into uncomfortable silence as their mockery was revealed to be harassment of someone Tank considered family. "Boss, you sure this is the same doctor?" asked one of Tank's companions, studying Sarah with newfound respect. "Positive. I'd recognize those hands anywhere. Steadiest surgeon I ever saw. Worked miracles when other doctors quit trying," Tank replied, then addressed the entire diner with authority that commanded absolute attention. "This woman saved my life when I should have died from blood loss. Dr. Sarah Chen is the finest trauma surgeon on the West Coast." Mel emerged from behind the grill, wiping hands while processing revelation about his employee's background. "Sally, you never mentioned being a surgeon." "Former surgeon," Sarah corrected quietly, "fighting malpractice allegations that destroyed my career. Medical board hearing is next week. They'll either restore my license or revoke it permanently." Viper attempted to salvage his authority through bluster. "Look, we don't care about ancient history. This freak still scares customers." Tank's expression hardened with deadly focus as he processed Viper's insult toward woman who'd saved his life. "Kowalski, you just called Dr. Sarah Chen the trauma surgeon who kept me alive when I should have died a freak," Tank said with dangerous calm that suggested violence was becoming inevitable. "That's right." Viper doubled down, too ignorant to recognize mortal threat. "Don't care what she used to be. Now she's just scarred waitress who shouldn't be serving food." Tank stood slowly, his frame unfolding with predatory grace, while companions flanked Viper's crew with coordinated precision. "Dr. Chen got those scars in hospital fire while evacuating children. You got your attitude from being born stupid and staying that way." The confrontation escalated when Viper made his fatal error. "Hell's Angels protecting some ugly bitch, guess your standards dropped." Tank moved faster than seemed possible, Viper's throat in his grip before the insult finished leaving the pipeline worker's mouth. "You just disrespected the woman who saved my life. In Hell's Angels code, that means personal debt requiring payment." Viper's crew reached for weapons they didn't carry, while Hell's Angels reached for weapons they definitely possessed. Violence balanced on knife's edge that would end with Viper learning respect through pain or permanent education. "Gentlemen, stop," Sarah interrupted with medical authority that had once commanded operating rooms during life and death emergencies. "Tank, violence won't solve workplace harassment." Her intervention surprised everyone, scarred waitress stepping between Hell's Angels president and pipeline crew with confidence that transcended physical intimidation or social hierarchies. "Doc, this piece of shit insulted your sacrifice while making jokes about trauma that almost killed you," Tank replied, maintaining grip on Viper's throat. "Some disrespect requires direct correction." But Sarah's appeal carried weight that civilian authority couldn't match. "Tank, you survived because we focused on healing instead of fighting. Let me handle this professionally." Viper struggled in Tank's grip, finally understanding that casual cruelty had targeted someone protected by people who settled debts permanently. His crew realized their jobs weren't worth dying over insults directed at Hell's Angels family. "Kowalski, you have 30 seconds to apologize to Dr. Chen before my patience expires completely," Tank announced, releasing pressure just enough to permit speech. Sometimes redemption arrives on steel horses, carrying justice that society's institutions had failed to provide. Viper's pride overcame survival instincts as he spat defiance despite obvious physical disadvantage. "I ain't apologizing to nobody, especially some burned-up has-been who can't practice medicine anymore. Hell's Angels don't scare me." The challenge hung in air like gasoline fumes awaiting spark as Tank processed Viper's refusal to acknowledge Dr. Chen's heroism. His companions moved into attack positions, while Viper's crew realized their boss had declared war against Motorcycle Club that settled disputes through overwhelming force. But before violence erupted, Sarah's phone rang with calls she'd been waiting months to receive. "Excuse me," she said, answering despite dangerous situation. "Dr. Chen speaking?" Her expression transformed as she listened to voice on other end. "Yes, I understand. Thank you for calling." She hung up and looked at Tank with mixture of relief and determination. "Tank, that was the medical board. They've reviewed my appeal and voted to restore my medical license immediately. All malpractice charges dismissed, professional reputation cleared, hospital privileges reinstated effective Monday." The revelation stunned everyone in Mel's diner as they processed information that scarred Waitress they'd pitied or mocked was returning to medical practice with full professional authority restored. "Furthermore," Sarah continued, "Riverside Medical Center has offered me position as head of trauma surgery specifically because my experience with harassment and professional destruction makes me advocate for other doctors facing similar attacks." Viper's worldview collapsed as the freak he'd mocked was revealed to be medical professional whose expertise would determine treatment when his workers inevitably suffered industrial accidents. His ignorance was exposed before Hell's Angels leadership that protected people they considered family. "Kowalski, you just spent 8 months harassing trauma surgeon who saved Hell's Angels president and will be running emergency department serving this community," Tank observed with dangerous satisfaction. "Your mouth bought you problems your insurance can't cover." But Sarah wasn't finished destroying Viper's assumptions. "Actually, Tank, there's something Mr. Kowalski should understand about medical ethics and workplace harassment." She turned to face Viper directly, her scarred features displaying confidence that 15 years of surgical training and 8 months of harassment couldn't diminish. "Kowalski, your company's safety record shows 23 workplace accidents requiring emergency surgery in past 18 months. Guess which trauma surgeon will be treating your workers when they get hurt?" The implication was clear. Viper's cruelty toward burn victim would be remembered when his employees needed treatment from surgeon he'd spent months humiliating. "You saying you'll refuse medical treatment based on personal grudges?" Viper asked desperately. "I'm saying I'll provide same professional care to your workers that I've provided every patient regardless of how their supervisors treat trauma survivors," Sarah replied with dignity that highlighted Viper's character defects. Tank stepped closer to Viper with expression mixing respect for Sarah's professionalism with determination to address disrespect that Hell's Angels Code couldn't overlook when family members faced harassment. "Kowalski, here's what happens next," Tank announced with authority that brooked no argument. "You apologize to Dr. Chen for 8 months of harassment, then explain to your crew why disrespecting trauma surgeons damages both business and personal health." Viper looked around Mel's diner, seeking support from crew members who'd suddenly developed intense interest in their coffee, rather than backing their boss against Hell's Angels' consequences. "And if I refuse?" Viper asked, though his tone suggested understanding of resistance futility. "Then you learn about trauma surgery from patient perspective instead of observer perspective," Tank replied with casual certainty that made threats unnecessary. Sarah watched confrontation reach decision point, understanding that Viper's response would determine whether her return to medicine would be celebrated or overshadowed by violence between people whose lives intersected through her healing rather than their conflicts. "Mr. Kowalski, I don't need apologies from people who judge others by appearance," Sarah said gracefully, providing face-saving exit from situation Viper's pride had created. "But I expect basic human decency toward service workers. Sometimes the greatest strength lies in offering mercy to those who haven't earned it, while allies ensure that mercy isn't mistaken for weakness." Viper faced defining moment of his character, apologized to trauma surgeon whose heroism he'd mocked, or face Hell's Angels justice that would make industrial accidents seem minor. His crew watched with growing understanding that their entertainment had targeted someone deserving respect rather than ridicule. "Dr. Chen," Viper began reluctantly, the title feeling foreign after months of cruel nicknames. "I apologize for comments about your appearance and professional situation." But Tank wasn't satisfied with grudging acknowledgement that avoided responsibility for systematic cruelty. "Kowalski, that's damage control, not genuine apology. Try again, and this time acknowledge what Dr. Chen sacrificed for other people." Sarah started to intervene, but Tank raised his hand with gentle authority. "Doc, respect requires acknowledgement, not politeness. Kowalski needs to understand what he's been mocking." The entire diner fell silent as Viper struggled with admitting 8 months of harassment had targeted hero rather than victim. His crew, Mel's staff, other customers, and Hell's Angels created audience for moral reckoning that would define how Sarah's return to medicine began. "Dr. Chen, I apologize for not understanding your background," Viper stammered, still avoiding responsibility for deliberate cruelty unrelated to ignorance about her medical career. "Better, but not honest," Tank replied. "Kowalski, you knew she was burn victim and decided that made her fair target. Address that specifically." Sarah realized this confrontation wasn't about her. It was about Hell's Angels establishing community standards for treating trauma survivors while demonstrating consequences for harassing people they considered family. "Look, I didn't know she was some hero doctor saving lives," Viper protested, minimizing culpability through claimed ignorance. "She's working as waitress, got scars, seemed like regular person." "Regular person?" Tank repeated dangerously. "Kowalski, you think regular people deserve harassment because they're working service jobs to pay medical bills while fighting legal battles?" The question exposed Viper's assumption that economic circumstances justified cruelty toward people whose injuries resulted from helping others rather than personal negligence. Sarah stepped forward with surgical precision that cut through Viper's rationalizations. "Mr. Kowalski, I wasn't offended by comments about my appearance. I was disappointed by your assumption that scars indicate weakness rather than strength." Her statement reframed conflict from personal insult to character assessment, revealing Viper's failure to recognize courage when it served him coffee daily. Viper finally understood that months of harassment had targeted trauma surgeon whose sacrifice deserved honor rather than mockery. His ignorance about her background irrelevant to cruelty he'd chosen to inflict on burn victim whose only crime was surviving heroic actions. Dr. Chen, I apologize for 8 months of cruel comments about your scars, Viper said with genuine remorse, acknowledging his behavior rather than circumstances he claimed justified it. You deserved respect, not harassment, regardless of your job or medical history. Tank nodded approval while Sarah accepted apology with grace demonstrating character Viper was beginning to understand. Furthermore, Viper continued, addressing his crew with authority he'd previously used for mockery. Dr. Chen will be treating our workers when they're injured. Anyone disrespecting trauma surgeons finds new employment immediately. 1 year later, Dr. Sarah Chen's trauma center at Riverside Medical had treated over 400 patients while establishing national reputation for burn treatment, combining surgical expertise with personal understanding of recovery challenges that traditional healthcare often ignored. Viper's pipeline company became unexpected advocate for trauma survivor support after learning about Sarah's heroism. Their workplace safety record improving dramatically under leadership emphasizing protection rather than mockery of injury victims. Tank visited Trauma Center monthly, bringing Hell's Angels donations and volunteer support for patients needing advocates during recovery that society often stigmatized. Doc, you changed more than medical care, you changed how people think about trauma survivors, Tank observed during ceremony dedicating new burn unit. Your scars became symbols of courage rather than sources of shame. Sarah smiled, understanding her harassment at Mel's Diner had been transformed into teaching moment about recognizing heroism in unexpected places while providing professional care that honored both her training and experience as patient rather than just physician. Dr. Chen's Trauma Center became model for survivor-centered medical care nationwide, combining clinical expertise with personal understanding of harassment and discrimination trauma victims faced during recovery. Viper's construction company established safety protocols preventing workplace burns while supporting trauma survivor advocacy programs. Hell's Angels chapters funded scholarship programs for burn survivors pursuing medical careers, honoring Dr. Chen's example of transforming personal trauma into professional dedication. Mel's Diner displayed framed medical journal article about Dr. Chen's innovations, reminding customers that heroes sometimes serve coffee while fighting battles others never see. 5 years later, Dr. Sarah Chen had established trauma treatment protocols adopted by hospitals nationwide while training hundreds of medical professionals who understood healing required addressing social stigma as well as physical injuries. Her partnership with Hell's Angels created unique support network protecting trauma survivors from harassment while advocating for medical coverage and workplace rights. She learned that scars aren't marks of weakness, but evidence of survival, that heroes are often found in service jobs, fighting invisible battles while maintaining dignity that inspires others to recognize courage in unexpected places and defend those who've already sacrificed more than anyone should ever have to endure. Sometimes scars aren't marks of weakness, but evidence of survival, and heroes are often found in the most unexpected places, fighting invisible battles while maintaining dignity that inspires others.